Moscow does not want to draw much attention to the exercises, since the course of the war in Ukraine demonstrates the inability of modern Russian army to confront NATO troops in conventional confrontation.
In my view, this strategic approach has been one of NATO's weakest points throughout its existence. It's disconcerting that NATO is only now beginning to grasp what it should have realized back in 2008, and certainly by 2017.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. And I'm your host, Matt Woken. In this episode, we discuss NATO's largest military training exercise since the Cold War, Steadfast Defender 2024, and whether NATO has woken up to the threats posed by Russia. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and don't forget to press subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our videos in the future. In a significant display of military prowess, NATO announced its intention to conduct Steadfast Defender 2024 in the coming months, the largest military exercise in Europe since the Cold War, with approximately 90,000 troops from all NATO allies. The exercise is poised to test and refine NATO's defense plans for reinforcing European defenses against a near-peer adversary. The exercise is strategically located in several key European countries and takes place from the end of January to May 31st, 2024. Our first expert, Mykhailo Samus, director of the new Geopolitical Research Network, discusses how military exercises go beyond more than just mere coordination, shedding light on the critical task of identifying and addressing the weaknesses within NATO, and how the exist to not escalate policy is one of the alliance's biggest vulnerabilities, which needs to change. Let's take a listen.
It really is an interesting topic, as it's not often we get to gather to discuss military training. Besides enhancing military coordination, I believe these exercises of NATO are focused on identifying and addressing their weaknesses. During military training, participants engage in various tasks and scenarios, covering vulnerabilities that require attention to enhance effectiveness. Regarding NATO's current vulnerabilities, as a defense alliance, its primary objective has been to safeguard all member states. Prior to February 24, 2022, NATO leaders aimed to prevent escalation and direct confrontation with Russia. In my view, this strategic approach has been one of NATO's weakest points throughout its existence. Prioritizing avoidance of conflict with the adversary inherently renders the alliance vulnerable. It is important to note that the adversary isn't limited to its member states, but should look a little wider and encompass a broader spectrum of operations. We see now Russia, North Korea, and Iran have strategically come together, and the significant player like China, which, while not directly involved in the military political activities, collaborates with Russia economically, supporting joint projects, among other activities, quite openly. This vulnerability has persisted for at least a decade. The roots of this issue trace back to the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the subsequent challenges NATO faced in defining its strategic objectives. In the face of the emergence of international terrorism as a global threat, NATO took it on itself to become the leader, but still struggled to articulate a clear strategic vision. When Russia invaded Georgia, NATO still lacked a comprehensive understanding of the situation. This inadequacy became apparent in 2014 when NATO responded to increased tensions by deploying strategic defense battalions in the Baltic states, albeit with insufficient numbers. The realization of NATO's unpreparedness for such scenarios only dawned during exercises like the one held in 2017 with Poland amidst Russian and Belarusian military activities and training. NATO's slow acknowledgement of its vulnerabilities, evident in ongoing training assessments, highlights a significant delay in its strategic adaptation. It's disconcerting that NATO is only now beginning to grasp what it should have realized back in 2008, and certainly by 2017.
Samus on NATO's leadership crisis highlights the concerning trend of the United States withdrawing from its global leadership position, posing significant threats to NATO's strength and future effectiveness. Let's listen.
At present, it's evident that despite ongoing training and discussions, there remains a lack of collective realization within NATO countries regarding the imperative to shoulder responsibility beyond their individual memberships. There is a growing need to transcend the confines of the alliance and assume a broader global leadership role. However, current trends indicate a concerning withdrawal of the United States from its traditional position as a global leader, which actually poses significant challenges for NATO and undermines the organization's strength and effectiveness.
Samus analyzes NATO's urgent response to potential Russian aggression, challenging the notion of a 5 to 7 year buffer, and he asserts that the urgency of the situation demands immediate action.
Now that more information is available, various news outlets, including European leaders, have proposed different timelines for a potential strike from Russia on NATO. Some suggest it could happen within 3 to 5 years, while others speculate it may take up to 7 before Russia initiates an attack on NATO. However, I hold the belief that there is no time to spare. They haven't got it. The notion of a 5-year window is an illusion, both for the US and Europe. Although I agree with my colleagues that NATO has recently taken some measures to counter Russian aggression. Consider the developments within the military-industrial complex. There are clear indications that arsenals are being fortified, built upon, not only for Ukraine's defense, but also for broader strategic purposes of these NATO countries. This includes advancements in artillery, precision weaponry, aviation, and other critical components. Precision weaponry, missiles in particular, isn't necessarily an advantage over Russia, but it stands as a pivotal priority in the event of an attack within a specified time frame during which Russia might launch an offensive against NATO. Contemplating the prospect of a Russian assault on NATO unveils plans for a hybrid attack aimed at fracturing the alliance. This strategy has long been considered, with scenarios involving potential provocations in regions like Estonia or the Suwalki corridor, leading to long deliberations among NATO heads regarding whether or not they should invoke Article 5 at the risk of escalation and creating a bigger war. Given NATO's fundamental role in safeguarding member states from external threats, any inability to respond effectively would signify the organization's failure, potentially leading to the organization's dissolution, and this is a scenario Russia has been contemplating in its hybrid warfare tactics for a while now. Observing the current political landscape in the US and the decision-making approaches of countries like Hungary and Slovakia, the possibility of such scenarios unfolding cannot be dismissed. Consequently, the notion of a 5 or 7 year buffer seems disconnected from the actual reality. It's imperative not only to enhance military readiness, but also to educate member states on war politics and scenario modelling. For instance, simulating a hypothetical scenario where Russia attacks Estonia during the upcoming NATO meetings could provide insights into leaders' perspectives and aid in decision-making processes. Perhaps it's time for NATO to adapt to evolving global realities by forming alliances based on shared geopolitical objectives, especially in the light of statements made by former President Trump regarding NATO and its intention to leave it. And so there's no such thing as 5 years to prepare. These scenarios are true, and Russia could soon attack a NATO country.
Our next expert, Volodymyr Solovian, head of the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, sheds light on the monitoring efforts the analysts have been undertaking. They analyze the narratives propagated by Russian propaganda with a particular focus on this training exercise. And he tells how the prevailing message is one of anxiety from the Kremlin, indicating the Kremlin's concern of a NATO waking up to Russia's threat.
Russian propaganda has traditionally paid attention to the topic of NATO exercises. In this regard, hybrid warfare analytical group at the Kremlin Crisis Media Center monitored Russian narratives. Those two dimensions of coverage of this topic by Russian mass media may be distinguished: alarmism and mockery of NATO. At the same time, its own failures in Ukraine forced Russians to evaluate its strengths more soberly. Therefore, tonality of Kremlin's media regarding Steadfast Defender 2024 is dominated by anxiety. The concern of the Russians is caused by the unprecedented scale of NATO exercises for a long time. Some Russian Z channels in Telegram saw a sign that NATO wants to surround the western Russian enclave, Kaliningrad region. According to the Russians, the Baltic Sea turned into NATO Iron Sea, while Kaliningrad and St. Petersburg turns to be under siege. The same applies to the Arctic space, where the NATO Navy dominates and Russian ships are forced to retreat to the safe distance. In this context, Russian media drew attention to the fact that recent signing of agreements between United States and 3 Scandinavian countries, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, provides the American armed forces with an additional foothold for military operations in the Arctic zone. It is also worth noting the absurd statements of Russian propagandists regarding NATO exercises. One of these fictions is the assumption that NATO officers will be transferred to Ukraine under the guise of training and take part in hostilities. Moreover, the Russians are spreading disinformation that in the simulation model of the Steadfast Defender 2024, strikes with tactical nuclear weapon against Russian regions such as Leningrad, Arkhangelsk, Murmansk, Smolensk, and Pskov will occur. Therefore, a number of radical commentators called the Kremlin to respond to the alliance with more exercises and so-called real preparation for the use of tactical nuclear weapons from the territory of Belarus and Kaliningrad region. However, in general, the reaction of Russian propaganda to the NATO exercises is quite moderate. Moreover, the Kremlin has not launched a coordinated information attack against neighboring Finland, which is taking part in Steadfast Defender exercises for the first time as a member country of the alliance. This indicates that Moscow does not want to draw much attention to the exercises, since the course of the war in Ukraine demonstrates the inability of modern Russian army to confront NATO troops in conventional confrontation.
Leonid Polyakov, military expert and advisor to the director of the National Institute for Strategic Studies, unveils NATO's strategic response to escalating threats. He tells how, in the aftermath of significant aggression in 2022, the Russian full-scale invasion, NATO underwent a paradigm shift in its strategic concept, recognizing Russia as a direct threat. This pivotal change led to the development of plans for troop utilization and a force build-up along NATO's eastern borders. Let's listen in full.
Now all NATO countries are involved, but the real deployment of forces is expected on the territory of 7 countries, with the participation of 90,000 troops. Besides, many other operational logistic structures are involved in almost all NATO countries. All personnel, of course, are involved. So why did NATO come to doing these exercises? Well, in short, in 2022, after the full-scale aggression, NATO's strategic concept was changed. Russia was recognized as a threat rather than some potential or any other diplomatic adversary. On the basis of this new strategic concept, during the year, the NATO headquarters developed appropriate plans for the use of troops and the build-up of forces and means specifically on NATO's eastern borders. These plans were approved in Vilnius already a year ago in 2023, and now the next logical step is to check whether all these plans actually work, how they need to be carried out, clarified, reinforced, provided, expanded, etc. And for this, of course, it is necessary to conduct real training. And that's how this coordination is conducted. 2 more areas were added to the traditional combat operation plans. In this case, they were meant to stop Russia's large-scale invasion on the ground, in the air, and at sea. To put it another way, these exercises include actions in cyberspace and space that is similar to the usual ones that happen on the ground, the air, and the sea. And NATO has pretty much always worked in this way. However, the military leaders made it clear that these drills involve planning defences on a national level, which hasn't been done before. So what does it involve? There are currently tests being done to see how ready and prepared the people in NATO member countries are to deal with military threats from Russia. Second, we are looking at the readiness and resilience of the infrastructure, its ability to withstand threats from Russia, and we're talking about the readiness of public-private partnership in the field of the defense industry. That is, to increase, if necessary, those types of weapons and ammunition if there will be a short-term or even long-term conflict. This is what Ukraine's experience has shown NATO countries, and this is something that was previously not considered during former exercises, but now it's being considered.
You've been watching the special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Analytical, dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find more information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. But if you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!